My name is Chomi Gwim, Head Vendor Management Unit Procurement Department, FirstBank. The theme of this year's event is sustainability in our partners' business. But before we start off the event, I want to state the ground rules for this webinar. Please ensure that your microphone is muted so that we do not get static noise during the event. The question and answer session will be addressed at the end of each presentation. So please send in your questions and comments using the Q&A chat box on your screen. In front of you, we have the agenda for the program, and I will now introduce the panelists and speakers for this event. I introduce Dr. Adeshola Adedutan, the Chief Executive Officer, First Bank of Nigeria and subsidiary. Mr. Patrick Iyamobo is also present, the Group CFO, First Bank and subsidiary. We also have in-house Mrs. Adeyemi Ogumoyela, the Chief Compliance Officer, who is ably represented by Mr. Matthew Olarewaju. We have the Head of Procurement, Mrs. Damilola Adisa. One of our key speakers is Dr. Frank Ojadi, the Principal Partner, Zacks Consult. Also, another key speaker is Mrs. Ini Abimbola, co-founder and Executive Director, Tixu Praxis Limited. In-house also is Mr. Michael Ayema from the Treasury team, Mrs. Adiola Abioye, also from the Treasury team, and Mr. Chijoke Ugoji from the Head Tax Management team. We now welcome Dr. Adeshola Adedutan, the Chief Executive Officer, First Bank of Nigeria and subsidiary, for the welcome address. Welcome, sir. Good morning, sir.
Yeah. Good morning, partners and colleagues. My pleasure to be present at this strategic vendor engagement session. First and foremost, let me appreciate our partners, because we consider our vendors as our partners as we continue to move forward with the execution of our business strategy. Even though we do have quite a substantial number of vendors, those of you that have been invited to the session today are vendors or partners. I prefer to use the word partners, that are extremely important to us in terms of our ability to implement and execute on our strategy. So it's kind of the best of the best that have been selected, the ones that are most significant to our business strategy going forward. And what is our purpose for having this engagement session? We, as you must have observed, we have moved away from the era of what I call haphazard purchases to what we call strategic buying, where we want to form long-term, mutually beneficial and rewarding relationship with our partners and vendors. And that's essentially the basis of this. So the values that are important to us, the need for our partners to be strategic and to be long-term in the way they approach the relationship with us, are the things that are very important at this particular point in time. We don't want to be transactional, and we also do not expect those of you that have been selected to join us today in this session. We're also not looking forward to a transactional relationship. If anything, we're looking forward to strategic relationship. So I trust that you're going to enjoy the session. I trust that you would extend the right level of cooperation and support to the team under Damilola and Patrick, who is the accountable executive in this procurement function. And we believe that we do have a platform that is big enough to meet your business aspiration, while also ensuring that we're able to execute extremely well on our own business strategy. So do have a very good session. And then I'm hoping that when I'm looking at the communique that will come out of today's engagement, is something that will inspire us to want to do more with each and every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. He has spoken about the mutual relationship with our partners and our focus on having strategic partners and not transactional partners. Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is the head procurement department, Mrs. Damilola Adisa, who will give an overview of procurement in FirstBank today. Welcome, ma'am.
Okay, good morning, everyone. You're very welcome to our 2020 first vendor engagement session. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, the CEO, for your welcome address. This session, again, we're holding to make sure we touch base, as the CEO mentioned, with our strategic partners, and to give you an opportunity to also discuss with us, to let us know what your challenges are, while we also provide information on various topics that we know will be relevant to you, especially in the era that we're in now. I will go through a short presentation of where the procurement function is now and where we plan to go in the near future. So as you know, FirstBank has been in existence. This year we celebrated 126 years. We're a global business in 10 countries and 3 continents. And you'll agree that for us to actually be where we are now, it's not by accident. It's because we're able to effectively execute on strategies and remain consistent. We're able to properly manage our cost and ensure that we deliver on the best quality. For us to be able to do this, we can only achieve our strategies through making the correct choice for our critical strategic partners. And this is what this session is meant to represent today. Over the last year, you would note that there have been a number of changes within the procurement function. You'll note that we have a stronger governance structure in place now. You would have been part of various technical evaluation committees or part of the price monitoring committee, where we take our time now to ensure that the partners we select for these key contracts or projects are able to deliver to the quality and the standard that we require at the end of the day. You'll also know that as part of what we've been doing this year is to improve drastically on our transparency and also on our equity goals. For those of you that have participated with us on the e-auction platform, which is an online real-time platform that allows you to bid for goods on our platform that and enables you to see the results of your bid immediately. You would agree that this has helped us tremendously in keeping our process transparent to our partners in our dealings with you. Another thing that we also have ensured this year is to actually move a number of our services under contract. And you will see us continuing to do that as we go into the coming years. What we want to do is to make sure that all our critical services are under contract, whether it is the service level agreement or a standard contract. What this allows us to do is 2 things. One, it makes the expectations clear on both sides, what is expected of FirstBank and what is expected of our strategic partners. It also helps us to ensure that our strategic partners are performing as required. So as part of what you see in the near future as well, is that we'll start having performance management measures, which will be included as part of our service level agreements. For some of you would have seen that already. We'll also be getting feedback from the end users as to your performance, as to your ability to deliver goods timely. For us to be able to achieve our mission as a bank, which is to remain true to our name by providing the best financial services possible, we can only do that by working with the right people that share in our goals, that understand where we're going. This is critical for us to ensure that we're on the same page as it relates to that. The CEO had also mentioned the fact that we want to ensure that there's a long-term partnership with our strategic partners. This is basically the theme for today. We'll be going through various presentations, we're having various discussions that will speak to this. Having partners that are sustainable is an advantage to us as a bank, as well as an advantage to you. It also gives us a chance to form various alliances with you, train you on aspects that we know will keep your business running. But for us to do this and for us to continue in this relationship, we also have to be clear that there are various expectations that we require of you as strategic partners of the bank. So this relates to things like delivering on time, delivering the best quality to the bank. We will not, settle for any kind of shortcuts when it comes to quality that is given to the bank. It has to meet the specification as agreed in our contract. And this again improves the standard of the work or the service or the good or that you're providing to the bank and the level that you're also operating at. It's essential for us that you also align with our core values as a bank. So what do I mean by this? Things like ensuring that you work ethically with us, that there's no collusion with any internal staff, external party. You're aligned with our regulatory policies, our compliance policies, our internal policies. You'll see a bit of the presentation as well being covered by our Chief Compliance Officer, which will speak to this. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to achieve is that we want partners that will stay with us for the long haul. We want partners that will be willing to grow, willing to expand with us as a business, even as we move to more countries, move to more continents. We want you to be successful as our partners. We want you to expand your business. We want you to stay in business. So these are all things that throughout the presentation today, throughout our talks today, you would see that highlighted. This is an open forum. We want to hear from you. We want to know ways in which we can improve, if there's any feedback that you need to give us, as well as, to make sure that we also touch on hot topics that we know will be relevant to you during this session. So having said all that, I'd like to welcome you again and hand back over to Chioma Edwin to take us through the rest of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. She has spoken about governance structure and how stronger it's going to be, making the procurement process more transparent. She has also stated this will stand on the quality of goods and service that we expect from our vendors, and the fact that we will take no shortcuts on service delivery from our vendors. Before I introduce the next speaker, I just want to remind that you can send in your Q&A, your questions using the Q&A chat box on the screen below, and then we would address this question and answers during the question and answer section. I now introduce Dr. Frank Ojadi, the principal partner, Zacks Consult. He will be speaking on revalidation exercise and how this drives our vendor performance, the scorecard, and our contract management. Welcome, Dr. Frank. Dr. Frank, if you can hear me, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Chioma. I'm glad to be here and really be a member of this wonderful vendor interaction and engagement. I will be speaking on the vendor revalidation program and why it is important for all the vendors. So my slides will be very brief, so I would allow a lot of time for you to ask numerous questions. For the purpose of this discussion, I would want to crave your indulgence to note that the term suppliers includes contractors and vendors for services and works, as well as supplies. So if you're addressed as a vendor or a supplier, a contractor, we're all saying the same thing. Also, the term performance monitoring means measuring a supplier's ability to comply with and preferably exceed the contractual obligations specified in the contract. So when you get to hear performance monitoring, it's not like the headmaster holding a cane behind your back. It's more of working mutually together so as to really achieve our obligations. And again, the same applies to the obligations that are included in your service level agreements with the bank. I will go straight away to the three key issues I'm going to discuss: the annual vendor validation exercise, the vendor performance management, and of course, which incorporates the contract and service level agreement management. Traditionally, I will start with this technical diagram, but do not worry, I'll make it as simple as possible. You probably will notice that it looks like a funnel. And what that means, it's simply that before you get into any business transactions with your with your customers, there's always the need for the customers, in this case, the bank, to really try and assess the capability and suitability of the vendors. And this is really what is called the vendor pre-qualification. But what is important here is simply that if you're actually going to supply or willing to carry out a contract, it's always very important for the organization to get to know who you are, to try to assess to see if you are really the kind of fellow that they need for this kind of work, service, and in fact, for a long-term partnership. And that's why they pull together almost everyone who has indicated interest to really assess them and then figure out those that they will want to do business with. So clearly it will go from the total, the number of vendors are there in the market or in that particular segment of the market, the alternative vendors, and then of course, the non-traditional vendors. Now you would notice that this exercise is in line with what Danny explained much earlier, talking about building strategic partnership with our vendors. And of course, vendors who do not meet these requirements will probably have to go back and reorganize themselves and build their capabilities so they could get a chance to also apply once again at a later date. But in the end, those who make this initial screening and filtration will ultimately be qualified to make the vendors list. And once you make the preferred vendors list, it means simply that once an offer or a requisition is raised, you probably will be called upon to really bid for that. And that really points towards the e-auction, which Danny had already talked much earlier. Now, the next step that comes out of this is the award of the contract. And what you have on this slide just shows the contract timeline right from the award to the closeout. So do not imagine that once a contract is awarded, it's now free for all, that things move on as usual. No, that is actually the beginning of that responsibility that has now been passed over to you. And the bank will be very much interested in trying to access and monitor your performance to ensure that we actually meet the requirements agreed in the SLA. So what we have there on the screen is a typical timeline that shows the scale of activities that will be going on. Now, don't get a little bit frightened by this. It's simply that there are different categories of supplies and goods and stuff. And therefore, not all will go through this, but those strategic ones, those essential ones, those important ones, will require some element of scrutiny to ensure that in the end, the bank gets value for its money. And that's really why you have the contract award, the review and sign off contract, then the confirmed prerequisites in place, the contract kickoff meeting, detailing exactly how you are going to be assessed in terms of performance, and all the other requirements like ethics, compliance, dispute resolution, and of course, your ability to keep with the KPIs. That is essentially the key performance indicators, down through to the contract closeout when all the activities have taken place. Now, I need to emphasize something here. If it is just a one-off contract and you're not likely going to come back to the bank again, maybe a unique service, then that's fine, it goes on, it goes off. But if it's a continuous service, a continuous procurement of an item, there is need for the bank to reevaluate your performance over time, which is why it is important to carry out the reevaluation activity. So once that kicks in, it means simply that the bank will be requiring you to submit the documentations that you submitted at the onset. Now, quite often, there's always some misconception here. It is not just for the mere purpose of supplying or providing those documentations. It is important that the bank knows where changes have taken place. Much as your performance will be monitored and evaluated perhaps on a quarterly basis or perhaps biannually, what is also important is that all those documentations that really you have submitted much earlier may have undergone some changes. No one actually uses the same financial statement all through 3, 4, 5 years of doing business with a company. There are changes that take place there, and these changes ought to be reflected. Same applies to your employee pension scheme and stuff like that. So we're going through some of these documentations at a later stage. And then, of course, what you have there on the map is a little bit technical, but I'll quickly explain that. If you look at the lower portion of it, you will notice initiate startup. That is award the contract. Now, the dotted black line across shows the contract objectives, and that's where the performance targets are actually going to be situated. What the bank is looking forward to is that you move above that line towards the green line, which shows improvement, not just achieving the performance indicators already agreed with you, but to go beyond that and show through your innovative activities that we are really capable of building this long-term relationship with the bank. But of course, those who go below this line will be given a reasonable chance to try and up their game and to try to improve. Where that becomes too difficult, of course, you will agree with me that no bank or no organization will want to maintain vendors or suppliers or contractors that are performing below standard. And therefore, there is need for you to not just monitor and manage this activity very well, but also to keep in mind that the bank is looking at what is going on. Now, again, this shows the myriad of activities that will be taking place, but they are all tailored towards ensuring that the risk is really minimized so that the bank can go on and build better relationships with you and be able to meet and reach its, exceed its stated objectives and goals. Now, there are benefits to this, and you will see that in the next slide. One, why therefore do we need to carry out vendor validation exercise? It is a global standard requirement to reduce risk potentials that may perhaps be out there in the marketplace. It is the start of a business relationship with FirstBank. That is a very critical point. If you don't go through this process, you're not likely going to really begin a business relationship, let alone build one that will last for a long time. It is also an opportunity for vendors. So they can always immediately notice that it is the beginning of the performance measurement that they are going to be subjected to in the course of their life cycle with the bank. It is also a basis for developing a vendor development program. What this means in essence is that for those vendors that do not meet up to the required standard, they will be exposed to some opportunities to help them develop their capabilities. It ensures that vendors remain competitive and proactive. So it's not a question of, well, we are complacent, we've made that list, we don't have any problems anymore with bank. No, the bank will continue to monitor your performance. Keep in mind that whichever category of supplies or goods that you play in, there are changes. It is dynamic, and there are changes playing out there in the marketplace. The bank will always be in a position to access the best opportunity it can get from the marketplace to be able to meet up with these requirements and goals. And therefore, it has to be competitive. And the vendor, you have to also be competitive in trying to be very proactive and innovative in reaching the objectives of your customers. It's also a basis for developing a list of approved vendors. We've already touched on that. And it encourages pooling of resources by vendors. Sometimes this very last point is a tremendous opportunity that is always seen across business, best business practices. We have vendors find it extremely difficult to go alone. they could always form a school, or they could always form an avenue, a medium through which they could actually get on and build partnerships to be able to deliver real value and quality to the company. Now let's just go straight away to some of these documentations. The certificate of incorporation, it's very, very critical. It is really what identifies you as a business, as a business entity. Without this registration, then you don't really have an identity. And that's why it's important that you submit this. It is rather mandatory. Then latest contract awards show the level of experience you've had in dealing with similar organizations like your present client. And of course, tax clearance certificate is also very important. It really shows clearly that you really conform and you comply with the requirements of the government. Now, this is an interesting feature because it naturally changes at the end of every year. So there is need for you to resubmit this as well as the other ones. Then the certified true copy of Form CO2 and CO8 or CO7 are also required. Now, why do we say that the current copy? The reason is simple. There are some vendors, we don't say you are one of them, that may go for a particular project or a particular contract and perhaps may not want some directors to names to appear there. So they quickly go and doctor it or change it up. No, FirstBank insists that you bring the correct one and it has to be the certified true copy. Employee compensation, I've already mentioned that your employee numbers may change in the course of executing a job in a year or in the course of your operating in a very diverse economy like Nigeria. And therefore, if these changes occur during the year, you need to also submit another one. Then we'll have the current evidence of OEM affiliation. This is very, very important. Most of our firms or most of the vendors actually represent international original equipment makers out there. And therefore, it becomes imperative that if this OEM wants to grow its business in the local environment, such as Nigeria, then it has to conform with the requirements. This is why we want this actually revalidated and brought and presented. Then you have your HSE policy, and of course the changing situation we have arising from COVID-19 regulations. Those are things we want to see that are clearly expressed in your document. Now, I've had a couple of questions from people saying, why resubmit this? Why do you need this? Look at it this way. If an organization or the head of an organization does not have a policy dealing with health and safety or COVID-19 regulations or even quality assurance, then how are we sure that they can actually provide quality services? This becomes something very important for us to deal with. The pension fund scheme, registration and current remittances, these are all part of the documentation. Then VAT and TIN registration evidence are also required. And then in the next slide, you will see quite a couple of other documentation. The SCUMO certificate, this is purely a government regulation or requirement. Then the latest audited financial statement. This again, for the past 3 years, this again shows clearly the movement and the activities as you drive through the diverse market that you play. Then, of course, the current organizational and current company organogram. And if you have professional certifications or trade licenses, they are also very important to be submitted. So the bank will be able to assess your capabilities and then be able to figure out if you are the kind of fellows they will do business with. Then, of course, you have the memos. Then finally, you have the key staff curriculum. In this case, you see quite a lot of staff movement. And sometimes some vendors may probably not have the capability to retain very vital, high-value staff. There is probably nothing wrong with that, so long as this staff will be available to execute the projects at the time they are required by the vendor. So that is that leverage. But the important issue is simply that they also need, the documentations need to be submitted regarding these fellows. I think I will take a break here and perhaps await your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Frank. He's mentioned the benefits of the revalidation exercise for our vendors. This will ensure that our partners remain competitive, proactive to provide value-added services to FirstBank. He spoke on the vendor performance management and our contract management. I will look go to the Q&A section to see the questions that have been sent in and pick one for Dr. Frank.
All right. I have a couple of questions here. I think I'll go ahead and take them. The first
Okay.
is, Chairman, do I go ahead?
Okay, what is the meaning of SCULM? SCULM.
Okay. Now, this is a requirement that deals with money laundering activities, and it's actually administered by the government arm of EFCC arm. You have to go through their website to be able to get registered with that. They are going to scrutinize your systems and so on, and then be able to establish if your firm is being used for money laundering activities. So there is need for you to get onto their website and learn a lot more about the SCULM.
Okay, another question from Mr. Tolu Adelowo. He says, will vendors be given time to procure some of these documents, especially e.g. the SCULM that you've just mentioned?
Usually vendors who really want to do business with organizations start early enough to pull together some of these documentations. The good thing is simply that they don't get to know that they require these documentations until the bank specifies what should be submitted. And therefore, if you go onto the line, to the EFCC line, you will be able to apply. And when you apply, they will also indicate how long it will take to get the result out. But the fact is that you have started this process by applying. And therefore, what it means is simply that over time, you are going to get your result. If they then say that you didn't qualify, you have to make contact with them to establish why. And then they will be very glad to explain to you what it entails. But you've got to be very patient in dealing with most of the government establishments.
Okay, and he asked another question, what is the timeline that will be given, which you have just addressed? Another question from Mr. Tolu Adeluwo is, what kind of documentation is required for COVID-19 guidelines?
Okay, we already have the NCDC guidelines, but the bank also would have its own additional guidelines to be able to operate in a very safe environment. So you need to ask for these guidelines and be able to work backwards to establish your capability to comply with these guidelines.
Okay, another question is from Ejikeme Egonye. He says, please, can you explain what is OEM?
OEM means original equipment maker. I'll give an example. No one assembles HP computers in this country. If you do, you ought to have had a license from the Hewlett-Packard in the US. And therefore, if you want to sell or stock their products, you apply to them to be appointed as their representative. In that context, they are the HP is an OEM, while you are a representative.
Okay, there's a question from Mr. Folabi Sterling Trust. He said, good AM from Sterling Trust. We have issues uploading the AFS the last time over 70 pages. How can you help on this when revalidation documents are being uploaded?
Well, we have quite a lot of software that enable you compress these pages. And more importantly, if you apply some of these software, it will enable you reduce the size so it can be uploaded. That's not really a problem. We've come across vendors that submitted over 100 documents. But what is important here, it's simply that it will only take a PDF document. So if you want to upload any document that is not PDF, it's not going to go through. So please be mindful of that. We've had instances where some vendors try to upload a PowerPoint document. It's not going to go through. But I think the instructions are very clear. If you follow them diligently, you are certainly going to really get through that scale.
Okay, another question from Yinka Lakija is related to that upload of documents. He said, my question is centered on uploading the documents online. We have serious challenges despite the documents were saved in batches under 2 MB, and we noticed we cannot upload the document twice as the subtitle can only take a part of the document. but you have just addressed it by saying they will
Yes.
need this software. There's another question here says, good morning. What happens if we were registered as a business name and later upgraded to limited liability entity? How do you go about revalidating with the procurement team?
Interesting. What it means is when the revalidation takes place, you are going to submit the limited liability registration document. And that should be reflected in even your financial statement. It should be reflected in almost all your documentations. So clearly, you need to be mindful of that. If you submit that one, we need to see evidence that you migrated from enterprise to limited liability. And that should be reflected in your documentations.
Okay, so do we require FRC certificates? And someone else says, please throw more light on the CO, Form CO2 and Form CO7, and its significance to registration.
These are the documents that contain the registered directors, okay, and a few other information regarding your business. And what that means essentially is simply that these directors are those that own shares in your organization. And also it shows the list of your shareholding. So clearly, they are very important, particularly those that own beyond 10% value of the shares. They are those that really have a very strong say in the ownership of the company. So you need to pick up that form from CAC and then go through them to understand exactly what is required. And then if need be, get your legal advisor to also advise you on exactly how you're going to go about those forms. But that is not really a challenge at all. The important thing is that once that is registered with CAC, they remain as your directors. And if for any reason you want to make a change, then you have to go through the same process again to get that change effected. And of course, it means simply that you have to submit the latest, that is the current document. But keep in mind that it has to be a certified true copy. That very one is very important. The certified true copy that this is really what has taken place.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Frank. And
Hello? Hello?
It appears that she's frozen, so I think she was thanking you for the presentation and for your answers to the questions. Okay. So what we'll do now is we'll move to the next item on the agenda. Pull that up. Which is on vendor sustainability practices. And I introduce Mrs. Ini Abimbola, who is the founder and executive director of TISO Practice. Thank you for joining us, Mrs. Abimbola. Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Dami.
Sorry that went
I
home.
see, okay, Choma is back on. So Choma, if you could just project. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this session. We'll have a short conversation around vendor sustainability, and what we want to do is to try to share with you what sustainability means, the concept of sustainability, introduce you as well to FirstBank's strategy around its sustainability and the role of its vendors within that journey. Also want to be able to talk about the supply chain code, sustainability code, which all vendors are supposed to sign up to and understand. So straight up will be, what is sustainability? So we'll try and define it in such a way that it is understandable and clearly defines what that means for you in your business. So this is something that once you understand what it means, you can define what it means for your own business. And looking at it in terms of the business case and what the environmental and social risk issues are. So what is sustainability? A lot of people will say sustainability is how long, but we say that sustainability is how well. So it is an approach to creating value. So first of all, is understanding that it's about creating value, the value that your business brings. And how can your business bring this value is that that value is sustained, and that value sustains and enhances the system and resources upon which that value depends. So within your business structure, what are the things that are within your business that ensures that you continue to create value over a long period of time? Again, remember, like I said, it's not just being there for a long period of time, it's also doing well, even while you're you are there for 100 years. So if you take companies like Coca-Cola, who's been around for over 100 years, they have not just been sustainable over a long term, but they are also, profitable and also in our faces. So that's what sustainability seeks to ensure. And then we say it's a business approach. So it's not just a highfalutin idea, but it's a business approach that seeks to build long-run competitiveness. So you are consistently competitive. You are in the market without duly compromising your short-term profitability and your cash flows. So you need to understand that as long as you have short-term profitability and your cash flows are flowing, then that is the business approach that you have created around your business. Now, in breaking that down, we say that it involves the entire gamut of what it is that you do. So the economy, the social, the environment, and breaking that down, we say for the economy and the social part, you look at it from the financial capital part, you look at it from the human capital, you look at it, so that's your staff that you have, you look at it from the social capital, what is your business doing within the society that you operate or within the community that you operate, and then the intellectual capital, which again goes back to the value that your business brings as a vendor to any organization, and particularly to the bank, as it were in this case. So again, here we say that it's a process of analysis and decision making across every business function. So it's not just in what you give out, but it's also who you are internally. You can't give what you don't have. So being able to put together who you are sustainably internally is what you will give out as a vendor externally. And here what we've done is to differentiate. So sometimes people use it interchangeably to say sustainability is the same thing as CSR. Sustainability is not the same thing as corporate social responsibility. It is more, it's a deeper part of it, which talks up to your business, to the DNA of your business and how you do business. What are the values that your business brings to bear? What are the things that ensure that your business stands out within its peers? So sustainability digs deeper in terms of balancing the economic, social, and environmental bottom lines of your business. And when we look at it in terms of integrating all that dimensions, what we've done here is to try and break it down so that you see it. So whichever place you are working in as a vendor within the bank, you can find yourself. So whether it's socio-environmental, which is the health and safety bit, climate change issues, crisis management, whether it's the areas of ensuring that your business has the permits and license compliance, emissions to air, water, chemical usage, and discharges. So if you look at it under environmental, social, economic, we've broken it down to sub-categories. So that is very clear in terms of the things that are required for you to say that you are a sustainable entity. And what does it mean? An integrated approach to environmental, social, and economic impact issues, both internally and externally. That's what leads to long-term sustainable profit growth for you. So you are ensuring that whether it's your health and safety, we find a lot of vendors will do health and safety for organizations, but within their own businesses, they do not have any policy, they do not have any ground rules in terms of safety, health and safety of their own employees. So this is just an example. When we talk about environmental, do you have the required permits and license compliance, and not just having it to tick the box because you're a vendor with FirstBank, but ensuring that within your business, it is understood why you have this permits and licenses. How are you also dealing with energy efficiency within your own business? So understanding these things will help you to understand why the bank is talking about sustainability. And even as a vendor, you can know that whenever you're delivering services, you're also delivering services that have the sustainability mindset behind it. So is there a business case when we're talking about sustainability? Some vendors, typically when we do this, a lot of vendors say, what does it mean? I mean, I'm a growing business, I'm a small business, I'm a medium-sized business. I don't need this, it's for big organizations. So is there a business case for it? And we're looking at it from the angle of vendor performance management. So I need you to understand it from that point of view. So here we have a case of an international brand. And we also have local examples, which I will share. So we have a case of an international brand called Primark. And one of the issues that happened was that there's a building in one of the Asian countries where Primark does its production. So it has third-party vendors doing his production. But he never checks what is happening there. All he knows is that we need 5 million t-shirts or 5 million of this product, and our third-party vendors ensure that they are delivered and all that. So they do not follow through the whole gamut of their value chain, which is why FirstBank is doing what it's doing with you today, ensuring that you understand the implications of what their sustainability strategy stands for, what the bank stands for, and understanding that it is critical to all the operational issues and the reputation of the bank in particular. So what happened was that the plaza where the third-party factory was, the garment factory was, collapsed. And it killed over 1,138 workers, and of course, a lot of people were wounded. Now, the issue was that Primark had, given this out to a third party without checking. So not only were they accused of having very low business ethics because they were not checking what was happening within their factories in India, but they also found out that the vendors were subcontracting middlemen who employ children. So they get FirstBank gives you a job. You clearly understand the requirements that FirstBank requires. You now employ third-party people who FirstBank is not aware of and who you have not checked their business ethics in line with the sustainability code, supply vendor code of FirstBank, and then something happens, or some of them are using child labor. These things have effect, and these are sustainability issues. So when this became public, and of course the collapse, at the end of the day, it is always the elephant in the room. It's the big brand that people will go after. It's not you, the vendor. So it is critical for the reputation of the bank that you understand the consequences. What were the consequences of this particular lack of coordination on the part of the vendor and the fact that the value chain was not checked? There were strong attacks from the customers. There was a mass boycott from customers as well. People were not buying their products anymore. And in 2018, they had to publish an online map of their approved suppliers because people needed to know who are the people supplying you. So if for any reason, you find out that you are doing a FirstBank product or something and you are not on the list of the approved suppliers, then that can be called to question and you can be sued. So this is very critical. The next thing that we see here is that we have some local examples. I don't know, Chioma, are you still with us? We have some local examples here. So there's a case of a bank in Nigeria. We've just chosen not to mention the banks. A case of a bank here in Nigeria that fire engulfed its headquarters. What happened? A tanker with 33,000 liters of diesel while transloading had caught fire as a result of some technical fault from the tanker. And before the health and safety could kick in, because they didn't even take note of the fact that when you are offloading diesel, there are certain standard practices that should be on ground. So our fire extinguishers on ground is, if possible, a local fire distiller on ground. What are the checks and balances that need to be on ground when you are discharging something that is flammable like that? These were not taken into consideration. And what happened? There was a service disruption for 3 hours, which resulted in serious losses for the bank. One of the industrial generators of the bank was damaged because, of course, it caught very huge fire. Panic from customers and even the employees within the organization. Of course, we talk about carbon footprints. This increased the carbon footprint of the bank because of the excessive fire. So carbon footprint is that black smoke that is emitted into the air. For a lot of organizations, they measure their carbon footprint even from their generators. And so these are core issues that you need to understand. And then most importantly was the fact that there was a wrong perception of, or well, we say wrong perception of lack of safety culture and consciousness of that bank, because of course they now had to go out in the public and say, oh, we had this safety culture, we had this. But the truth of the matter is something had happened and it came from a vendor. So the next local example that we have is also another bank. We decided to use banking examples so that you understand that these are real issues. So there was a scaffolding accident that happened. So what happened was it was during routine maintenance. So they had put on the scaffolding, and this was from a subcontractor. Now, the set of scaffolding collapsed, and 3 persons fell from the platform, and this was very high. So again, remember what I talked about, reputational damage, and we are going to look at that in terms of the risk that comes with you being a vendor to the bank. So this was reputational damage again to the bank, because the idea was that, oh, you take on vendors that are not qualified to do the work that they do. Financial loss, because the bank had to also foot the bills. Again, remember, like I said, it is not the vendor that the general public will come after. The general public will come after the elephant in the room. In this case, the big elephant in the banking sector. And we do not want that. Again, like we said, backlash from stakeholders. They will say, look, there was no due diligence by the bank, but the bank had done its work. Vendors just wanted to cut corners to be able. So with FirstBank, this is unacceptable. And as you sign the supplier vendor sustainability code, it is clearly defined the things that are unacceptable for you as a vendor, that are totally unacceptable. You must ensure that, you know, if you're subcontracting anything, this has to be at the behest and the knowledge of the bank. So again, this takes us to E&S. So when we talk about E&S, we're saying environmental and social risk, and you need to understand this as well in terms of your own business. So we categorize it into credit risk, liability risk, and reputational risk. And what environmental and social management really means is that a set of policies, procedures, tools, internal capacity that is needed to identify your exposure to environmental and social risk. So as a vendor organization, you need to have this within yourself. Now, these things are not big things. They are policies that you create and you share with your team, your staff, and your employees, so they understand that for the kind of work that we do and for the kind of organizations that we work with, these are critical issues. And why are these things? Why are E&S risk or business risk presented to companies? Because it also helps you in terms of reduce cash in, reduce cash out, impaired assets, liabilities. These are key issues and key areas that you need to understand. Again, when we talk about assessing this risk, we're also saying you are thinking about reputational risk. Looking at the examples that I shared, you can also see that reputational risk is a big issue, because once there's a negative thing that happens, then it dents the image of the organization. Choma, you can go forward. It dents the image of the organization within the media, with the general public, and even within the business and financial community. Then there's the issue of strategic risk. The fact that you need to understand that things will change very quickly. So for instance, as of January, February, a lot of us didn't understand there was anything like COVID that was going to shut down the entire world. So nobody really planned for that within their risk management framework. But this is also a lesson. We've now taken it as a lesson, and the updating of organizations are going to be doing a lot of updating of their own risk management framework to ensure that, okay, this is one of the things that can happen, and then there's the disruption of business activities. So likewise, you as a business, you need to be able to look at that. Another thing would be the operational risk. Like we said, if anything happens within the work that you're doing for the bank, and say a technical failure, server breach, or like the examples that we saw, fire outbreak and things like that, that is related to you as a vendor. Again, this is a huge operational risk for the bank. And of course, most of this risk carry financial losses. So losses for you as a vendor and losses for the bank. So in as much as you may look at it that, oh, some of these issues, but they are critical issues, and they are critical sustainability issues. So why is the bank talking about sustainability and ensuring that you understand what this means? Is because they want to manage environmental impact issues as much as possible, and at the same time cost. Every single thing that you do around the events, and even within your social and economic aspects, carry cost with them. They also want to secure and improve supplier vendor channels. It's very important. Protect against reputational damage. We've talked about that. Drive innovative products and services at the same time. What is your benefit as a vendor? You also reduce costs within your own in terms of understanding even issues as simple as recycling and use of more efficient materials. So instead of using materials that after 1 year you need to come and change, the bank will come back and ask you to come, and after some time the bank will understand that this is not sustainable. They can't keep doing that, so they will look for another vendor that can, provide much more efficient and long-term materials. So you need to understand that each of these things carry their consequences as well. And then the bank, for you as a vendor, your risk is efficiently managed as well. Increased reputation among present and future customers, suppliers or vendors like you have a higher chance of, obtaining loans, tax reliefs, and business support from the bank. What does the supplier sustainability code cover? Issues around environmental protection. We've given you examples like, when you are discharging fuel, what you need to understand, what needs to be there, and things like that. Human rights and labor practices, how are you dealing with your employees? You are not using child labor and things like that. Business conduct, compliance with laws, rules, and regulations. You've seen that in the first presentation in terms of the documents that you need to have to be continue to be a supplier within or a vendor in bank, and confidentiality and responsibility for company resources and health and safety. So these are critical areas of the code. And how does this work? All significant vendors are expected to read and understand the supplier code and sign the attestation form that we understand and we are willing to abide. Also, ensure that you have a management system that your scope is related to the FirstBank supplier vendor code. So once you look through the code, you ensure that everything that the code requires, you have set it up within your business. These are not big things. Trust me, again, as I said, they are just policies, but it is essential that if you are a vendor with a bank, then you must be able to abide by these things and inform your employees and workers about the expectations that are contained within this code. These are the things we can do. These are the things that are not acceptable under the sustainability code of the bank. So that is just it in terms of all the things, and we'll take questions if you have any from here on.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Abimbola, for that beautiful presentation. She would mention that sustainability is a business approach to create value. She highlighted the difference between sustainability and CSR, and she also used the local case studies to bring home the value of sustainability for our vendors. So I'll just check the Q&A section to find questions for Mrs. Abimbola. Okay, so what will it cost me to be able to abide by the sustainability code?
Abiding by the sustainability code won't cost you anything other than the fact that internally you have to have your own risk management framework. You have to have your own sustainability policy. So one of the things we've noticed within the bank, there are some banks that have added it to their vendor requirements that you must be able to upload a copy of your own business sustainability policy. Some banks have done that. So you need to have your own internal business to say, what are the things that are critical for us as a business? What is material to us as a business? So human rights is material for us. Reputational issues are important to us. Vendor subcontracting is important to us. So internally, you need to be able to have your own policies that clearly state. So it doesn't cost you anything other than the fact that internally you need to go back and ensure that the things that the code, for instance, clearly define. So if the code says to you that you need to ensure that the people that are working with the bank on this particular service that you are providing are clearly not underage, clearly qualified for that, you may need to present that. Aside from that, I don't think we're talking about any financial requirements at this time.
Thank you, Ma. There's another question. What next steps do I have to take to become a sustainable company?
Now, again, as I said, sustainability is really about managing your risk. So ensuring that even your financial risk, are you, again, an organization that has your cash flow is consistent? How do you manage that to ensure that when you are given a job, you are also able to deliver on that? What are your policies within your organization as a vendor? Because sometimes you find out that organizations do not have any policies that guide them. They just want to be a vendor, collect the pro forma invoice and supply, and that is all. But here, the whole idea behind being a sustainable business is to ensure that you also following the rules guide any business that wants to be sustainable, not just over a long period of time. Remember what I said, it's not about being around for so long, but how well are you doing as a business? And what are the clear issues around your business? So as a vendor for FirstBank, is your business all around you? Or your business has a structure around it that if you as the core person is taken out of that business, can the business still run? Will FirstBank have to start looking for who is the next person to contact, or they will have to take you off the vendor list because they cannot contact you? You were the be all and everything of your business. So these are the things that help you to be a sustainable business. Who else within your organization can be reached as a key person? These are key issues. These are things that you need to look into and seek guidance in terms of what are the things that I need to do to become a sustainable business.
Okay, so what Mr. Taiwo Akiolo says, is this the same as business continuity policy?
Your business continuity policy is part of your sustainability policy. So your business continuity is part of your business. So, but do you have a sustainability policy? Have you clearly defined what your environmental and social and governance risks are? Do you clearly have your business continuity? Do you have a clear demarcation of what your governance within your organization is all about? What are the things that are critical to you as a business? So these are the clear issues that, if that is captured in your business continuity, then you can upgrade it even to be a sustainability policy.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Abimbola. Due to time constraints, we'll need to move on to the next topic. Please, I just want to remind you to send in your comments, your questions using the Q&A chat box. I now introduce Mr. Matthew Olarewaju, who is representing the Chief Compliance Officer, Mrs. Adeyemi Ogumoyela, to speak on the regulatory.
Thank you so much, Chioma. It affords me a great pleasure to welcome us all to this forum on behalf of the Chief Compliance Officer of the bank. Chioma, it would be fine if you can bring up my slide or I share from here.
Hello, Matthew.
Okay. Thank you. Because it's so critical for us to look at the issue of regulatory compliance at the heart of sustainability, then this particular session is coming up. Can you move the slides, please? Guys. Presented here is the statement of the vision and the mission of the bank, which speaks to a broader perspective to the purpose of sustainability at the heart of the bank. This is a core mandate that the bank has to be the clear leader and then African banks of first choice. That's speaking to the commitment of the bank to do its business or conduct its business with utmost integrity, transparency, and compliance with legal, ethical, and regulatory standards. And also, that is also speaking to the expectation of the bank from all its partners or vendors that they will also work with the bank and commit themselves to the core principles of the bank, which speaks to ensuring that all regulations, all laws established both nationally and internationally are complied with at every point in time. Inherent in virtually every aspect of our business is an element of risk. And then virtually every speaker before me had referenced a whole lot of risk that we need to manage. And the only instrumentality or tool with which we can manage all these inherent risks is compliance. So it's expected that as third-party vendors, we manage our compliance risk, which speaks to the necessity for all vendors to ensure that there is no violation of any law, of any rule, of any regulation, both nationally and even the ones the bank had put in place in its different policies. It's expected that every vendor will manage its reputational risk, which speaks to the perception of the customers or the client base of each vendor, how satisfied they are with the approach, with the culture, with even the service delivery that the vendors offer. It's expected that every vendor will strive towards managing its transactional risk, which speaks to the extent to which, or the status of service delivery, and then maybe supply of products, as the case may be. Operational risk, every vendor is expected also to manage that, because inherent in your delivery of service, in the production that you do for the bank or for every other client, is an element of operational risk, which speaks to whether your processes, your systems, or your people will fail to deliver even on set targets or the core principles or objectives of your business. Also, the issue of credit risk is at the heart of sustainability, and every vendor is expected by the bank to manage his own credit risk, to be able to meet up with his third-party obligations and not be found wanting even in meeting his obligations. Presented here are the internal policies of the bank, which are the internal mechanisms the bank has put in place to manage its external risk associated with vendor relationship. It's expected by the bank that the issue of bribery, which is a crime by every law and by every standard, the bank prohibits it. The bank has zero tolerance for offering, promising, giving, or soliciting for bribe by vendors, by every other stakeholder, even internal stakeholders. So we also frown as a bank at corruption in whatever guise it may want to even show itself. And that is why that policy is saying, for us in FirstBank, we don't encourage facilitation payments. And that is the payments used by businesses and individuals to either expedite the performance of a routine, which ordinarily is their entitlement or their right. So the bank is saying we don't encourage that as part of our anti-bribery and corruption policy. Also, we don't encourage what is known as reciprocal agreements, which is exchanging goods or services when one transfer is contingent upon the other. So all these we regard in FirstBank as prohibited activities, and is expected that every vendor will also treat such prohibited activities as being prohibited as we go along in our relationship with them. The next one, which is also an internal mechanism of the bank, is the one that speaks to gifts policy of the bank. The bank says every form of gift is not encouraged. We don't encourage our employee, their immediate family members, their relations, or any of our vendors also. We don't encourage them to accept, solicit for gifts in exchange for undue advantage, as the case may be. So gifts that are not allowed by FirstBank includes cash gifts, even valuable items that can be used to store values like prepaid cards or airtime credit. All these we regard as gifts in FirstBank, and we prohibit them by virtue of that policy on gifts and hospitality from third parties. So we don't expect even our third parties to excessively lavish on our employees or their family members any form of gifts, because that is a policy of the bank, and it's not limited to all these ones that are mentioned here, but all manners of gifts that are targeted towards getting undue advantage or deriving pecuniary benefits. So the bank prohibits that as a matter of policy from third-party vendors. You can move the slides, Joma. The next one is the code that speaks to the minimum acceptable standard of norms, of rules, of even best practices that we expect from individual party or from organization that we are into business with. Third parties are expected to be committed to the implementation of this code, not just signing the code of conduct, because I know that at the point of onboarding we would have executed that. But beyond the routine or the ritual of signing the code, it's expected that this becomes a culture within the organization of each vendor, of each third party. It is expected that all workers of our vendors are treated with utmost respect and dignity. It's also expected that there should be no discrimination of any kind or bias or unfair treatment of any of the third party, maybe workers, wherever they are located. And it's expected that the hourly requirements as established by extant laws and regulations is complied with. Payments of compensation should be fair, shouldn't be done with any bias by any third party. And when it comes to engagement of labor, it's expected that no third party vendor will engage a child or employ the services of what is called child labor. The minimum acceptable age to FirstBank and even to the law is 15 years of age. And these ones should only be engaged even for light operations or light labor. So every duty labor should not be given to this set of people within this age, below the age range of 15 and 18. And then for those who are below 18, it's expected that they are not engaged in night duties. So all these are extant provisions of extant laws in the country, and which we expect our vendors to comply with totally. The next one is speaking to conflict of interest and related third-party transaction. It's a policy of the bank that where personal, occupational, or financial interest will affect the objectivity or the kind of judgments that will be taken on a particular transaction, is expected that that will be properly disclosed by the third party or the related party concerned. It's expected by FirstBank that both new and existing vendors of the bank will disclose, wherever this exists, any form of conflict of interest or any form of relationship they have with a particular transaction. Non-disclosure to us in FirstBank, we frown at it and then we regard it as a prohibited activity. One mechanism the bank has also put in place to manage its risk that may militate against sustainability is this whistleblowing policy, which is expecting every stakeholder, both internal, external stakeholders, to report any observation of unethical conduct, whether by employees, by management, by directors, or by any stakeholder in whatever form the stakeholder is related to the bank. It's expected that where we observe unethical conduct or we suspect any unethical practice by any stakeholder, that report is expected to be properly filed by the bank. The bank attaches so much importance to its policy, and that is why periodically this is being reviewed even by external consultants to make sure that the policy is kept in tune and in tandem with recent developments, relevant happenings and trends in the industry. And then there are channels. Chuma, I want you to project that, the media for whistleblowing. The bank expects that where we have observation of or allegation or suspicion of unethical practices or conduct by any stakeholder is expected to be reported through these channels, maybe a formal letter to the MD CEO of FirstBank, to the Chief Audit Executive of FirstBank, and then it can be through these dedicated phone lines or through the web service, which is available even on our internet, on our organization portal, or through this dedicated email address, whistleblowing@firstbanknigeria.com. And the regulator is so concerned and has an interest even in whistleblowing. And that is why, if all these internal channels that have been provided have been exhausted, you can also blow the whistle directly to the CBN at anti-corruption unit at cbn.gov.ng. So this is a responsibility or an obligation expected of every stakeholder, both internal and external, to be able to report any suspicion of unethical practice or conduct by anybody. So you can move ahead, Choma, this slide. In summary, our expectation very big, and they are enshrined in all the relevant policies that have earlier been mentioned, and even others of their kind. We say, as a bank, we don't expect any vendor to offer bribes to our staff or to allow bribe to be offered on their behalf to any of our staff with a view to gaining undue advantage, maybe in process or in any of our system that is put in place to ensure that our risks are well managed. We do not offer any gift, tips, or hospitality to our staff. So we don't expect any vendor to do that to any of our staff. The bank is your customer, not the staff. So that should be That should resonate with every vendor at every point in time, that actually you are in a relationship with the bank, and the bank in this relationship is your customer, not the staff that you interface with or that you relate with. It's expected that every vendor will ensure good conduct all the time in their dealings with other stakeholders, maybe outside FirstBank, or in their dealings with FirstBank. So good conduct, ethical practices are what FirstBank encourage. What affects you affects the bank, and that is why the issue of reputation is very key. And that is why everybody should pay due diligent attention even to managing reputational risk, as it may affect us or it may affect your own business. At all times, we expect that our vendors will disclose all related transactions. We want you as our vendors to be as transparent as possible, because it is part of consumer protection regulation expected for every organization to comply with. Then the whistleblowing policy of the bank has to be complied with as well. Where you see any kind of violation, any kind of unethical practice, whether by suspicion or you have observed it, it's expected that you report, because reporting or whistleblowing is in your best interest. In all, the bank encourages transparency and integrity, and we expect that that will be replicated even in the organization or among the vendors that we do business with. A big question, a big issue is the issue of data protection, which came into effect by virtue of the enactment of the Nigeria Data Protection Regulation 2019. And that places a responsibility on every responsible organization to ensure that in the collection, in the storage, in the processing, in the transfer, even in the management of data, all the provisions of this NDPR 2019 are complied with. That is why for us as a business, we expect that all our third parties will implement to a reasonable extent the measures, the principles contained in this particular regulation, which speaks to how we should collect data ethically and use data for set objectives. And when we are transferring data, there are guidelines, there are regulations to be met, so that our third parties will be aware, or third party vendors will be aware that their reputation, their brand, which also rub off on our own brand and reputation, at stake, and it speaks to the way and manner we manage data that we have access to as a bank. Remember, FirstBank is a compliant business, and it's expected that all our third-party vendors will also be compliant in their dealings, in their business relationships, and in the management of their own client base as well. You can move ahead, Choma. Choma, waiting for you. Okay.
Thank you, Matthew. Sorry, I was muted. And thank you, Matthew, for that presentation. Matthew has highlighted our third-party code of conduct, the gift policy, FirstBank stand against bribery and corruption, stating that in the bribery and corruption policy. And he has also provided the whistleblowing channels which our vendors can escalate these issues to. He has also reminded us about the data protection regulation. So I will just read through the question and answer section to find questions that relates to Matthew so that he can answer. Does FirstBank monitor third-party code of conduct? Yes, we do monitor the third-party code of conduct before our vendors are registered on the system. You are asked to fill the third-party code of conduct form, and then we have a report that shows all the vendors who have complied, and then we follow through. There are no other questions for Matthew. When they come in, we'll collate same and give you feedback. But now the next item on the agenda is the appreciation of our vendors, our top performing vendors. And for that, I want to introduce Mr. Patrick Iyamabo, the Group CFO, First Bank of Nigeria and subsidiary, to do this. Welcome, Mr. Patrick. Hello, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So thank you. Before I go right into that, I'd like to just provide some context to help you really appreciate how we view our relationship with the vendors, and why this appreciation is an important thing for us, and sets the tone for how we want to be viewing this relationship going forward. By the way, we've used vendors, suppliers all day. My preference is business partner. And I think that better reflects how we view this relationship as FirstBank. So first of all, the CEO graced this occasion. The presence of the CEO, in spite of his urgent meetings, he had to step out of a meeting to do that, really reflects the priority we give to the strategic partnership with our various business partners or vendors. It also would also like you to appreciate what that means from us from a strategic perspective. So it's not a one-off relationship. It's not transactional. This is really about a partnership that will help the bank improve its competitive position and accrete value. And we believe that that will also happen likewise to our partners. So thought to make that point. Professor Ojadi of XAV Consult took time to speak to how we assess the performance of vendors. We wanted to make this clearer to everyone so that you can appreciate the kind of drivers we are focused on and we will increasingly focus on into the future. It has nothing to do with who you know in FirstBank. It has nothing to do with how long you've been doing business with us. It's really about who has the capacity to perform and deliver. And we thought this KPI, the scorecard, the way we think about these things, the various SLAs, it was very important to make this very transparent to our business partners and to discuss around some of the points that might not be clear. And we can still do some more after this. But again, when we get to the vendors we want to appreciate, these were some of the inputs that went into objectively identifying our top performing vendors during the period. You would notice that Professor Ojadi did not necessarily speak around who is doing the biggest volumes with us. We're looking at more concrete and sustainable things. And speaking about sustainability, you heard Mrs. Abimbola again. She's, as you know, founder CEO of Thistle Praxis. And this is the preeminent advisor on matters of sustainability. And sustainability, and it was really great, she differentiated sustainability from CSR. And sustainability for us is really about accreting mutual value on a sustainable basis, operating in best practice, operating best practices. Again, the points she stressed are really critical. We are FirstBank, we're a big entity, we are visible, we are exposed, we're expected to set the standards, and we believe those standards that were shared, if both FirstBank and our business partners uphold them, value accretion will occur well into the future with competitive advantage sustained as well. Again, these were considerations taken into identifying who we considered the top performing vendors and we will be appreciating this morning. The bit by our compliance function, this is something you will always hear every time we have this session because it is really, really important to us. Things like bribery and all that, those are really big no-nos. Put it differently. If you're going to be doing business in ways we've articulated here that we do not want your business. We do not want to do business with you. And there are lots of other institutions you can transact with. But the beauty of this engagement this morning is we're not discussing with all the vendors we can possibly have. We're not even having this session with all the vendors of the bank. We're having this session with the strategic vendors of the bank. And so we're in the right company that really appreciates and we believe share a common viewpoint with us around compliance. But nonetheless, this is something you cannot speak enough about. And again, it also feeds into those we've identified as our top performing vendors. And we want to appreciate this morning. And so going into the appreciation, I think the slide has gone off the screen. Would like to speak to the key criteria considered. Choma, if you can project the slide, that would be great. It's off the screen, I believe. We would like to speak to the key criteria considered in identifying our top vendors. There are different ways to slice and dice it. I just explained how the presentations by Ojadi, Professor Ojadi and Mrs. Abimbola contributed, I mean, the context shared. But you can also think about these things in terms of quality, speed, and price. Price we take for granted because we have a process to normalize price. The real sustainable value accretion will come out of speed and quality of service. So quality of service for us includes things like innovation, ideas you share with us to allow us differentiate and better compete, the quality of the products you offer to us as a FirstBank. Those are the things we're thinking about. Now, how you respond quickly to issues raised, the timeliness of your delivery, those speak to considerations around speed. And so you've been in this business for quite a while, so you can immediately appreciate how quality and speed considerations can uniquely position FirstBank to be more profitable, to be more competitive, to be more responsive to our customers. And we believe that ensures alignment from our customers all the way to our business partners. The last two considerations you see there really speak around documentation. This is particularly important this year because we're revamping the documentation of our vendors with us. And the need to do that, you heard quite a bit of that today. And then very importantly, the last one speaks to the support during the pandemic period. During the pandemic period, with the business disruption, as you would all know, FirstBank continued to offer service throughout that period. But our ability to continue to offer service would have been impossible if we did not have vendors that could step up to the plate and match our requirements. And so these last two are really critical this year in terms of how we assessed our top 5 performing vendors in 2020. And so if we could move on to the next slide. And the next slide captures the various vendors that fell into that category or came out top 5. So Meccano, which is a power company, Main One, which is a telco data company, Secure ID, which offers digital solutions, System Tech, an IT company, Inlax, a technology distributor. So I'd like to say a big thank you on behalf of FirstBank for the wonderful support you've offered in the last year. A big thank you once again for stepping up to the plate and raising the standards in the direction that FirstBank would like to have it. A big thank you as well in advance of your continued improvement to ensure we get to that point of strategic, sustainable strategic business partnership we would like to have with our critical vendors. So thank you. And for those of us who haven't made this list, we still say a big thank you. And we're very open to working towards moving standards to this level or getting into this bucket. This bucket is dynamic, but you can be rest assured, not only do we pay very special attention to our strategic partners, we especially pay attention to those that make it into the top bucket. So once again, our big appreciation and thank you very much. Dami, you want to take it from here, or Chairman?
Thank you very much, sir. And thank you very much to all the vendors, our top performing vendors, and all our vendors who aspire to become one of our top performing vendors come next year. Before we move on to the next topic, please, I just want to remind again that you can send your questions, your comments, and using the Q&A chat box. Our next speaker is Mr. Chijoke Ugoji, the head tax management. He will speak on the new tax development in Nigeria and what is expected from our vendors. Welcome, Chijoke. Hello, Chijoke, are you on the call? Thank you. Welcome, Chijoke.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the event. I'm here to take you through some of the recent changes in the tax space that would impact how we interact with you during the year. Go up to the slide.
Hello?
Hello, Chama, advance the slide.
Okay, then.
Okay, so the first one in the list is the value-added tax. As you all are aware, the value-added tax rate was increased from 5% to 7.5% during the year. And this is entirely the bank's liability or burden. But we expect that the vendors would include this in their invoices when they issue it to the bank, and the bank will pay it over to them. But for non-resident vendors, bank would remit it to the tax authorities directly. And withholding tax, there is no new development in withholding tax anywhere, but we're trying to re-emphasize the fact that this is a tax that will be applicable in transactions with our vendors. As you are aware, the bank is the agent of government for the purposes of deducting and remitting the tax. And the applicable rate actually depends on the nature of service rendered and the registration status, company registration status of the person rendering the service. So essentially, bank will be deducting this tax at the appropriate rate prior to payment of our vendors. And we would expect that the vendors would also have valid and correct tax identification numbers to be able to take credit of the withholding tax that have been deducted and remitted to the tax authorities on their behalf. Stamp duty is another area that the federal government is emphasizing in current year to be able to ramp up revenue. And the expectation from the bank is that all its general agreements will be stamped at the rate of 1%. This duty will be applicable prior to payment of our vendor. have your valid tax clearance certificates at every point in time every year. The vendor is required to provide this at the documentation stage. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chijoke, for that presentation. Chijoke has highlighted the new the new stamp duty charges, and also reiterated the fact that your tax clearance is a mandatory document that we require from our vendors, and that going forward, we'll expect our vendors to submit same annually. We'll move on to the next topic, and the person engaging us on how to deal with the current FX challenges and its availability. I introduce Mr. Michael Anyima from the Treasury team. Welcome, Mr. Michael.
Yeah. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You're welcome to today's presentation. I'm going to present, but we'll have a presentation, but I won't follow it, so we can send that to you later. But I'll present what the market is doing, why do we have challenges in the market, and what we can do about these challenges. The FX market is like any other market. The FX dollars in particular is a product or an asset that is tradable like any other product. And like any other product, the pricing of an asset is determined by demand and supply. So what we have here is a market that has been decimated into so many markets. As you are aware, we have the I&E window, which is also interbank as well, the interbank market. We also have the retail auction market, the retail window, which most customers are able to buy from CBN. We have the wholesale window. We have the SMIS window, and then eventually we also do have the black market. These are all different markets, different windows in the same FX market. No matter how you decimate them, all these markets play by the same rule, the laws of demand and supply. And so today, it's quite difficult getting dollars. Even the one from central bank, you get very little of it if you're able to get at all. So I guess most of us will have experienced that difficulties in getting dollars from the central bank. But why are we having these issues? Why do we have liquidity issues? So I want to discuss the supply nature of the market and the demand nature of the market, and why it's such a difficult thing for us to have liquidity in the market. The central bank is the major supplier of FX in the market, the central bank. And typically the central bank, you can gauge the level of supply of the central bank by looking at the reserve. Our reserve currently is around 35.7 billion, a moving average. So you will say that reasonably we have a bit more of reserve. But to put it in context, Russia has over $500 billion of reserve, and yet at the height of the crisis, Russia did not defend their currency. So even though we might think we have enough of reserve, it goes to tell you that reserve is very important. It gives confidence to external players, and so you might not want to use all your reserve to defend your currency. So central bank is the biggest supplier in the market. We also have foreign investors who come in to invest in Nigeria. We have the portfolio investors who invest in equities, invest in bonds or fixed income securities. We have the foreign direct investors who come to set up businesses in Nigeria. And anybody will tell you that the foreign direct investors are the preferred investors because they stay much longer in the country when they go to a country. Portfolio investors usually come in, and when the going gets tough, they all take off, they all run away. So, and today, what is happening is that instead of them coming in, they're actually going out. So supply from foreign investors is negative, it's not positive. Everybody is running out. Then we have the typical inflows from corporates and from individuals that come in from time to time, and from our brothers and sisters in diaspora. because of the pandemic, we are not having enough of such coming in because businesses out there are also slowed down. And they've laid off a lot of people in the foreign countries, in the Western countries. So we are not getting as much from our brothers and sisters in diaspora. And then because of this fear of capital control or expropriation of funds, a lot of flows are not coming into the individual accounts or corporate accounts. And for what you are seeing is more people are willing to take their money out at any cost. Then we have the exporters. Exporters export and they're expected to repatriate the process of their export into Nigeria. But usually what happens is it takes a bit of time. And then because of coronavirus, we are not exporting as much as we used to for most commodities, including soft commodities and hard commodities. So we are not exporting as much as we used to. So even the quantum of dollars expected from exporters has reduced, in addition to the fact that even the one that we exported, they are struggling to return them to Nigeria. So these are the supply, and you can see the clear problem we have. Aggregate supply of the country as a whole is challenged. We have a negative current account balance. We are struggling with the balance of payments because we are not getting enough dollars into the country. So even the central bank that has the reserve is very mindful because if there are no plans to bring in enough dollars, if they use reserve, what happens after reserve is finished? Oil prices will have been the best source of, oil sales will have been the best source of dollars, but we all know that oil is challenged as well. Even though it's trading at $41 per barrel today, it's been very volatile, trading between 39 and 45. And then production, there are production cuts by OPEC to ensure to hold the price high enough. So all these things are having a very serious effect on the supply side. And the fact that we are not even able to sell our cargoes, that's another problem. And so even when the oil prices are $41, $42 per barrel, ability to sell your cargo into the market is a problem because major traditional importers of Nigeria oil, like America, are not producing a lot. They're probably one of the biggest producers in the world. So the supply side is a challenge. What about the demand side? Most of us here are on the side of demand, importers. We are importing goods and services into Nigeria. So we need dollars to bring in these goods and services. But we don't have enough supply to support our demand. So, and it's as if it's accumulating over time. So demand has gone up exponentially based on importers' demand. Foreign investors who ideally should be bringing in money are rather taking money out. Most of them. So today, depending on who you talk to, we have $2 to $3 billion demand of foreign investors that are yet to be taken out of the country. So it's, in addition to the fact that the supply has dropped, we have most people trying to run out of the country as well. And the individuals and corporates are also doing everything possible to move out dollars from the country. So supply has gone down, demand has gone up. Demand has gone up more than the normal demand you see because of what is happening in the environment. Normally, foreign investors will not be running out, but because of what is happening in the environment, demand has gone higher than what usual is. So if supply drops that significantly and demand goes up, what ideally should happen is that the price of the goods should go up. But we know that that will imply devaluation and the implication of devaluation to the economy and to price of goods and services. So what the central bank has done is to hold the price fixed. Now, when that happens, it creates structural issues, and that is what is causing the illiquidity in the market. Can you ask yourself, how come the black market is not going above 480? It gets 480 and it comes back down again? Because at that price, people are not willing to buy. So there's an equilibrium price at which markets can trade. But we also know that we cannot move the official rate to 480. That would be disastrous. So we've kept it fixed, but that has created illiquidity because we don't have enough supply to meet the growing demand. What has worsened this? One thing that's worsened this problem is the fact that interest rates are also very low in Nigeria today. Now, today, the 1-year Treasury bill is yielding below 3%. Inflation is doing 13.84%. Interest rates are extremely low. So investors that ordinarily will have come in to enjoy higher yield can't come in because they will experience negative real interest rates. And those of us in Nigeria that should invest in our country, because interest rates are extremely low, we cannot invest. And so what we think of is get dollars and invest in dollars. And that has also increased the demand in the market. Now, low interest rate is not bad. Let's get that clear. In fact, economists will tell you that when there's a conflict between economic growth and inflation, which is called stagflation, as we are experiencing in Nigeria today, what you should do is sort out economic growth, which means you need to get optimal employment. Or what that means in effect is that people should work, people should have ability to take care of themselves, take care of their family, food their bills. That is economic growth. It's far more critical. Existence before essence. You have to live before you can talk about inflation. So economic growth is far more critical. But because of the nature of the three major variables of economies, interest rate, inflation, and exchange rate, if you bring down interest rate this low, you cannot afford to hold the exchange rate fixed. Then it becomes a problem. That is where the challenge is. So interest rate is very low, and that is exacerbating the liquidity problem in the market. Another problem we have is the pandemic. We blame everything on the pandemic. But remember, the pandemic COVID pandemic affect people who have underlying health issues. We seem to have had underlying health issue before the pandemic strike. So it has worsened our problem. It has increased the liquidity problem we have in Nigeria today because we are not getting enough dollars in, countries are not doing very well, and everybody's running to their house. So that has increased the problem. So this is the reason why we don't have enough liquidity in the market. Liquidity is extremely tight, and to get dollars today, you will agree with me that that's quite difficult. So the question then is, what can we do? As a bank, because you are vendors and you are buying goods and services for us, what ideally we do is we try to prioritize our vendors. You might say that you're not seeing that because you're not getting as much from us or from central bank. But I can assure you that we try to prioritize our vendors. But when we go for retail, remember, the person who decides, or the authority that decides who gets what in the central bank, many a times we need about 16 to 20% of what we go for. So if, for example, we go for 100 and CBN give us 16, then we have to allocate accordingly. So, and CBN determines who gets what. It's not the bank that determines who gets what. So even when we try to prioritize you, it is quite difficult because the determining factor comes from the central bank. Central bank used to sell wholesale to us, but they stopped. Wholesale, the bank has a bit of leeway to decide who gets what, but that has not happened for the past 3-4 months, or maybe 6 months as well. So it's quite difficult for us. All we'll say is that just bear with us as we try as much as possible to meet your needs. The interbank market where we could buy and give you is non-existent. You can't get liquidity in interbank markets. And exporters who ideally should sell to interbank market, before they even get to the bank, they've sold. So that's the problem. But I can assure you, we'll try to prioritize because it affects our operation. If you're not able to get in our goods and services that will support our banking operation, it becomes a problem. So we'll have that, we are mindful of that, and we'll try to prioritize that. Another thing you can do, which is very important, is because of continuity of business, and you don't want your business to run down, what you can actually do is you can borrow dollars and import what you want to import. And anytime you're able to buy back your dollars, you pay back what you borrowed. This is very important. Think about that. Because if you're not able to import, most of us, our businesses is importing goods and services from offshore. If you're not able to import, our businesses will have to stop running. But if you can borrow dollars, I mean, if you are importing for FirstBank, for example, and that means FirstBank will have to pay you for what you are importing, you might as well just approach FirstBank to borrow dollars, and then whenever you're able to buy your dollars, you pay back FirstBank. In that way, you can have a bit of liquidity. Finally, let me talk about the NDF market. I know it has become a problem for so many of us. The NDF market does not provide liquidity. In fact, if you are a customer that can buy from CBN, you are advised to go to CBN, don't buy NDFs. But if you're a client or a customer that can only buy from INE, you might want to look at it. What the NDF market does is it gives you a bit of assurance. It protects you to some extent, not full extent, to some extent, your price risk. For those of us that bought at 360, when the market was developed to 380, we're able to make 20 naira on our expected demand for FX. The question you need to ask yourself is, if I buy, where do I think the naira will be in a year's time or in 6 months' time? Will it be at this level? Will it be at 400? Once you have answered that question, check the price of your NDF. If it makes sense, if it's below what you expect, then it will make sense for you to buy. So as long as your expected price of the currency is below the price that corresponds to the maturity you're looking at, then you are better off buying the NDF. For those of us that can only access the IE window. I know it's been a tough time. If we were to project into the future, this year will be tough. The pandemic, we are seeing the second wave around the world. We don't know whether we are in the first or second or third wave in Nigeria. Nobody knows what is happening. In fact, I say there's no COVID yet. But the point is, we are affected. Whatever happened out there is affecting us. So this illiquidity might continue for a while. Please, let's look at what we can do so that we can continue to do our business. And if you think of any other thing that we think can help you out, we'll get back to you. So thank you very much for listening. If you do have questions, I'll be happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michael, for that presentation. I have a few questions here that I want to share with you. One of them is, do we expect to see further deterioration in the exchange rates?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. The answer will have been obviously yes, if we're to leave it to market to determine. Any of the models you use, economic models you use, either you use the real effective exchange rate model or use the purchasing power parity model, it tells you that what we should be is above 400. So 380 obviously is an overvaluation of the currency. But don't forget, in Nigeria, the market, the official market is regulated, in quotes, regulated by the central bank. So the central bank determines where they think the rate should be. And at the moment, they are comfortable at 380, 386 levels. And so between now and year-end, I don't think the currency will move. I think the central bank will keep it here for a while. The only thing, I say this, caveat, the only thing that might move the central bank is if they still want to collect the loan from World Bank, and World Bank insists that they should allow the currency to trade in a more flexible way, then it's money. Other than that, I expect the currency to remain where it is in the official window, as you've seen now. But the black market is a different ballgame. Black market is driven by demand and supply. Black market reacts to information, to trades. So you will see a bit of volatility in the black market, which some people will tell you is actually a better reflection of where the market should be. But officially, I don't see it moving. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. There's another question here. Is there a preference for vendors seeking Forex, be it from Q or otherwise, to execute FirstBank POs?
Yeah, as I said in my presentation, we try to give priority to our vendors because this is for us. If you don't bring in these goods, we're not able to do our business. And for business continuity, even for FirstBank, we need to ensure that you're able to bring in goods for us. And so yes, priority is given to you in this regard. But as I said, most of the decision as to who gets what in the FX market is by the central bank and not by us. And so that limits our ability and flexibility to give you a bit more. We always say that just bear with us as we try to engage the central bank and see what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you. There's another question here. Please, can you clarify on the aspect of borrowing dollars? At what rate? Why wouldn't the bank pay vendors in dollars?
Okay, let me take the second part of the question. It is against the law in Nigeria to pay anybody in dollars. It's against the law. So if I want to pay in dollars, I can't do that. Sorry. But in terms of borrowing, you don't need to. It doesn't have to come from FirstBank. It can from any bank. If you show them the invoice of FirstBank and tell them, look, FirstBank is willing to pay, a lot of banks will want to take the risk on FirstBank paying in Naira. But as I said, because you are providing goods to FirstBank, FirstBank might be able to, if you can meet our risk acceptance criteria. Rate is a function of risk. It depends on how the banks view you in terms of risk. But I think if goods coming to FirstBank, it might be better for you. But I think it's a solution, a short-term solution to the FS liquidity until you're able to buy. But don't forget, borrowing dollars does not take out the exchange risk. You still run the exchange risk. And anytime you buy dollars, you buy at the prevailing market rates. Just remember that. And also remember, it doesn't have to come from FirstBank. It can come from any bank. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. There's another one here. We are all aware of the exchange rates have gone up. What can the bank do to help those who quoted prices that have been signed into the SLAs?
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. You put prices that are below where market is currently. It's a learning point. So I think next time when we are signing these SLAs, we should put that flexibility there. That if before a particular event happens, market has moved, we have to renegotiate the rate. Now, it's always better to use a benchmark. A benchmark monitors the market. So if market moves, the benchmark will move. The benchmark is independently determined, and then nobody can cry of wolf here. So for example, if you use the NAFEX rate, today NAFEX rate is reading 386, for example. It changes every day. It's a benchmark. It's determined by an independent party, FMDQ. So nobody can cheat anybody. So when you're drawing up such agreements, please, it's better to go with a benchmark. The benchmark always tells you where the market is. What can we do? That's beyond my pay grade. I don't think I can answer that question. The responsible authorities will have to look at that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Michael. There's one question I wanted. What rate would you predict the dollar to be changing in the next 6 months? My view is that it's almost at the price of the BM as of today.
6 months. So 3 months, end of year, I don't see it changing. 6 months, If I were to put myself in the shoes of the governor of the central bank, I don't think anything will happen for the next 6 months, in my opinion. But it all boils down to how difficult things turn out. So let me say this. The federal government is very concerned about economic growth. Our last economic growth figure was over -6%. Obviously, we are in recession, even though with the fourth quarter hasn't come out. But as the saying goes, if it feels like recession, if it tastes like recession, if it looks like recession, then we are in recession. So in actual sense, we are in recession. And because of that, that's why the fiscal side and the monetary side have decided to keep interest rate this low for a long time. Now, if this keep interest rate low does not move the economic growth, then something must give. We have to create more liquidity in the FS market. Then the central bank will have to move. That's what moved the central bank from pushing the rate from 360 to 380. So it's a difficult prediction. You don't have models. It's not economic model where you can predict. It's based on sentiment. It's based on feelings. And it's based on how the central bank views economic growth. So 6 months is a tough call. I'll put my head for 3 months. And I think in 3 months, the market will be where it is currently.
Thank you, sir. There's one last question before I now throw the questions to all our panelists. We received some more questions that will not be on your own subject. But there's one here. It says, we have continually have difficulties accessing from Q for importation of materials for FirstBank project. How can we be assisted here?
Okay, so as I said, we'll look at it. So for such specific requests, send them in. Treasury will look at it. As I said, we'll give our vendors priority because it affects us as well. So just be assured we'll do that. And just send your request, and as long as we are told your vendor, we'll look at it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Michael. Chijoke, if you're on the call, there's one question here that says, if you could throw more light on the stamp duty tax.
Hello? I had responded to it in the mail. Okay. We're saying that the law requires agreements with our vendors to be stamped at the rate of 1%. So essentially, we are the ones that are going to be paying the vendor for the services rendered, and we'll be deducting the 1% stamp duty prior to payment, and we'll remit the amount deducted to the tax authorities. So when the tax authorities come to us, we show that the agreements were appropriately stamped. In the event that you also need the same evidence to show that you also surpassed stamp duty on the agreement, we will share the remittance receipts with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chijoke. Thank you everybody for sending in your questions. For all the questions we're unable to answer here, we would collate and then send your feedback using our first support support at firstbanknigeria.com to give you those answers. I now hand over to the head procurement department, Mrs. Damilola Adisa, to give the closing remark and vote of thanks.
Thank you, Chioma. I would like to thank all the participants that have joined us today and the flurry of questions and insights that have been required here today. I'll also like to thank the external speakers that joined us in providing so much information and educating us as a bank, as well as the strategic vendors that are on the call. Professor Frank Ojadi and Mrs. Ini Abimbola, we thank you very much for joining us today. Professor Ojadi, we thank you for your time in taking us through the importance of this documentation that we need to have in place with our strategic vendors. Mrs. Ini Abimbola, we thank you especially for all the discussions that we had on environmental and social risk and ensuring that our strategic partners understand this. The recording, because I have seen some questions regarding the recording, will be made available after this call to all the participants here. So you'll have access to this information and you can replay it as you please. A number of questions have come in on uploading documents, on branches, when the recipients don't receive goods, what should we do, and various questions that you have. So there are two things we're going to do here to make sure we're able to respond to all your questions. We're going to take all the Q&A questions that we have here, as well as the ones that have been sent to us by email, document all this and provide responses, which we will send to each and every participant here via email. In addition, we've tried to respond to as many as we can while we're on this call, but I can still see that there are a number of questions there that haven't been responded to. You can also send us an email if there's a particular situation that you have, maybe on an invoice or some information you need to find out from us, to firstsuppliersupport@firstbanknigeria.com. And I'll repeat that again. It's firstsuppliersupport@firstbanknigeria.com. Now we want you to keep in mind that as we work within procurement, we also play a role of being the supplier's voice in the bank. So if there are any issues you are having with non-payment, something hasn't been issued to you, you deliver the good, it hasn't been recorded yet on the system, please feel free to send us an email in that address. Again, it's firstsuppliersupport@firstbanknigeria.com. We have a team that manages that desk to provide you responses and to help you find out information that you need in the bank. So having said that, I would say thank you very much for joining us at this session today. We look forward to these engagements with you. They help us to improve ourselves and our processes internally as well. And we hope that this will not be silent from here on, that we'll still hear from you even before our next engagement session. We also thank especially the CEO that joined us this morning for the welcome address, as well as the Chief Financial Officer that has been with us throughout this session. With that said, I will close out the session. CFO, I don't know if you have anything additional you want to add before we close out. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. So just to say thank you for taking our time to participate in this session. Please view yourselves as strategic business partners of the bank. and we will increasingly be emphatic around this into the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have an excellent day. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.